Do you have a blazer that fits really boxy in the body, and every time you put it on, you're like, I wish this fit better? Well, today I'm gonna show you how to take in the blazer in the body, and it's super simple. So even if you're not used to doing a ton of tailoring, this is something you're going to be able to do. Real quick, before we start, if you're enjoying Sewing Anastasia, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel a lot. And if you want to learn more about sewing, check out my online and in-person classes, plus the online sewing club. There's links down below for everything. So the first thing you need to do is try it on and figure out how much extra fabric do you have and where exactly do you need to take it in. Now I'm going to be demoing this on the dress form today, but you are going to be doing this on yourself in the mirror. Now, when you're doing this, you might want to just take it in a little bit, just like 1/4 inch here or there, and that's okay. Or maybe you want to really tailor it to the shape of your body. Today, I'm going to be making this fairly tailored to the dress form. So when you're thinking about taking in the fabric on the blazer, you want to look for the seams on the blazer. So you probably have a side panel on the blazer. So you're going to notice a seam over here and then a seam towards the front. There's generally not a side seam on a blazer. Sometimes there is, and that's fine too. But we are going to be taking it in through the seam. So we got a seam here, we've got a seam here, and then we also have a center back seam. So you can see we can get some really nice shape out of that center back seam as well. In general, it's a great idea to be using this seam over here that's on the side and the back. And then obviously we want to keep it symmetrical, so we'll use the other seam over here. So we have 3 seams here that we're going to be using to take in this jacket. Now, sometimes there's not a center back seam, so if you don't have a center back seam, I want you to concentrate on the 2 seams on the side of your jacket for taking it in. And you can take in that extra fabric that you need from the back through those 2 side seams. The key to having a great tailored blazer is making sure you're keeping it balanced while you're pinning it and taking it in. So you don't want to pull everything over to the side. You can see all of our seams are going to start moving the wrong way, and it's going to fit bad. And same thing with front to back. You don't want to take all the fabric from the back and pull it up to the front, and you don't want to take all the fabric from the front and pull it to the back. You really want to keep things balanced on your body and be shaping it to your curves. I'm going to start with the center back panel here, so that way I can get rid of a lot of the fabric here in the lower back. You just really have to make sure you're blending out and then blending up as well. I'm going to be starting at the waist at center back, and I'm going to pinch it evenly on both sides of the seam. And I'm going to put a pin there. Now I don't want to take all of the excess out of that, so I'm still going to leave some movement in the jacket on the sides right now. And now what I'm going to do is blend up and blend down. And what this means is that I'm going to start taking in less fabric as I go up. And you're going to notice that this is just going to blend into nothing, which means that pin is just going to be on the very, very edge of the fabric. So we'd barely be taking in anything up here. And then we start taking in more when we get to the waist. And now we're going to blend out over the hips as well. So when we're taking this in, we're taking in the most at the waist, and then we're blending out top and bottom. There we go. So now we have that center back seam taken in, and you can already see how it's creating some more shape here in the back. And you can see it's taken in the most at the waist, and then it's tapering out to the bottom to nothing and tapering out to the top to nothing, blending right back into our existing seams. Now I'm going to take in the seam that's next to the center back. So this is part of my side panel, but it's the seam on the back. So again, I'm going to start at the waist, pinch it in as much as I think I need it. And we don't want to start seeing pull lines. You don't want to make this really tight, but you want to take it in enough to where you're seeing a difference here. And then again, we're going to blend on both ends down to the hip and up to the center back. And this seam is going to run into your armhole. So I want you to make sure you are blending it just to the armhole. We're not gonna work with any armhole alterations in this process here. So we need to make sure that we're not taking in any fabric right here by the armhole. It has to blend out completely at the armhole here. And you can see here how we're getting the shaping through that seam. So now I'm going to be pinning the other seam So I want you to take this in roughly the same amount as you took it in over here. Don't worry about if it's not perfect. I'm going to show you how to deal with that in our next step, but you want to be able to try it on and make sure it's tailoring properly. So we're also going to start taking in the seam here on the other side. And we're going to be following the same process on this side as we did the other side. And there we go. Now we have all 3 seams in the back pinned up, and you can really see how much we're going to be taking in. It looks like maybe we've got a total of 3 inches in the waist, and then we're blending out from each one of those points. Now that we're done pinning, it's time to try it on and make sure it fits and it's looking good and you don't have any pole lines. If you have any like pole lines happening, you need to take in less. So this is why putting in the pins and trying it on is a great idea. So I tried on the jacket and it fits good, just how I needed to. So now we need to take the coat and turn it inside out. So we're gonna have to do a little seam ripping in the lining so that way we can flip it inside out. And if you don't have a lining in your jacket, you can just go ahead and skip everything I'm doing with the lining and just move forward to where I start chalking and sewing. So to turn this jacket inside out, we need to open up the lining somewhere. And generally in the sleeve, you're gonna find this little pin tuck that you can open up because that's where they closed up the jacket originally. This one, they did not do it that way. This one, they did it through the hem by hand sewing the hem. So I'm gonna have to go through the hem on this one, but here's a jacket that has that pin tuck on the sleeve. So normally I would be opening up this little pin tuck here so you can see it's like this little ridge on the sleeve lining. And this is how I would be getting into the jacket. But today I'm going to be going through the hem. I do recommend going through the sleeve. This is an easier method so you don't have to redo the hem. So again, I'm just going to be seam ripping open this catch stitch here that's at the bottom of the hem, and then I'll be able to get into my jacket. And I don't have to undo the entire hem. I just need to undo enough to flip it right side out, so probably about 7 or 8 inches. There we go. That looks like enough to be able to turn it inside out. Now that we have that open, let's turn it inside out. And we got to turn it inside out because we need to create our seams on the inside. So you might notice that you have your lining caught in some spots when you were pinning it. That's totally okay. I'm going to show you how to deal with that right now. So we don't want to lose our shape or our pins, but we don't want to catch that lining. So what I want you to do is come to the outside. I'm going to hold the fabric right where that pin is. I'm going to keep my nail right where the pin is. I'm going to remove the pin. Don't let go, and I'm just going to pull out the lining from that little spot. And then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to add that pin back in. And then I'm going to continue that process. So it looks like I have it caught a little bit on the one below. So I'm going to hold the fabric where the pin is, remove the pin, and then go ahead and just pull the lining away. And then I can go ahead and put right back in the pin. And I'm going to continue this process until all of my lining is not cut. So I'm just going to work my way to the next pin, remove it, pull out the lining, and continue. Now that I have the lining free floating and it's not attached to the outside fabric, we can take it and turn it inside out. So now we can see these seams here that we're going to be taking in. You can see basically where the pins are, how it's like held together and then pulling apart. So now what we want to do is mark everything. So we're going to come through, and what I like to do is kind of hold it taut, and you'll be able to see where the pins are at. And I want you to mark on both sides of where the pin is. So that way when we undo them, we're going to have this new sewing line. And if you have a seam allowance in the way, just flip over the seam allowance and mark it. And if you lost a pin or two while you were doing this, that's okay. We're going to connect our lines and smooth them out before we sew. Okay, so I've got that seam marked. Now I'm going to move over to my other seam. Now I have one more seam left. Okay, so I have all of these seams marked now with the chalk on both sides of where the pin was. So believe it or not, now we need to turn it right side out so we can remove the pins and then flip it inside out again. You might be wondering, why aren't I just sewing my lining to the self? Well, we want this to look how it was when we store-bought it, so very professional. And if you're sewing that lining to the self fabric, you're going to get extra pulling and bunching, and generally your lining is bigger, so that way you have more room to move and you don't rip your lining. And if you're sewing it to the fabric, you might rip your lining. So I've removed the pins and my jacket is inside out again, and you can see my blue chalk marks where I marked with the pins. Now some of them aren't even on both sides of the seam line, so we're gonna fix that. So what we're going to do is measure. So I've got a blue mark there and a blue mark there. So I've got an inch there. So I need to make sure that I'm a ½ inch out from the seam on both sides, so that way I can take it in evenly. So I'm just going to be using my clear 2-inch ruler, and now I've got a ½ inch out from center on both sides. So now that is even. And now what I like to do is find out where the last pin is that I put in, my last chalk mark. Looks like it is right here. So I need to be blending from my biggest part, which is my 1 inch at my waist, down to this line here. So to keep everything nice and smooth, even if I've got a pin out here by accident, you know what? Sometimes we pin uneven and that's okay. So I'm gonna go from this 1 inch at the center waist, and then I'm gonna blend right back into the existing seam. So you're going to see it's going to be on an angle. We're going from 1 inch at the waist to nothing at the bottom there. So this here is going to be our new sewing line when our jacket seam is folded in half. And now I need to do the same thing to the top of the jacket. That last yellow chalk seemed a little hard to see, so I'm just going to re-chalk this for you. There you go. So now this is going to be our new sewing line essentially. Now let's move up to the top. So now we're going to be going that 1 inch out from the waist. I'm just gonna move this over, and then we're gonna blend right into the seam up here at the very top of the coat. Now you want all of these lines you're drawing to be super smooth and blended right back into the existing seam gradually. You don't want any like big curves or hard angles happening. So now you can see how much we're going to be taking it in on the outside of the seam, from nothing at the top to about 1 inch at the waist, and then blending back into nothing here at the bottom. So when we sew this, we're taking our jacket and we're folding it in half right at that seam. And if you have a plaid, you want to make sure you line up that plaid. So whatever we drew on this side, we're actually taking it in double. So remember I measured 1 inch there, so we're taking in a ½ inch here, and then it's blending out to nothing up here. So right in this area in between something and nothing, we're gradually taking it in. So you're going to do the exact same thing to any of the seams that you're taking in on your jacket, and then we'll be ready to sew. So now I have all of my sewing lines chalked and I'm ready to sew. And I just want to mention, when I did these two outside seams, I measured both of them and I made sure that they were equal. So we want to make sure that we're sewing the same distance from the seam so the jacket is getting taken in equally on both sides, so it's not shifting one way or the other. So I measured the width and the length of each one to make sure they're the same. I'm starting in the existing seam at the top. I'm going to make sure that I am back stitching, and now I'm going to blend out following that chalk line that I drew. Also engage your needle down button if you haven't, so if you need to stop, just make sure your needle's in the fabric. Take out your pins before you get to them, don't sew over your pins. And make sure when you get to the end that you're also blending off smoothly and ending up in the seam allowance on the existing side. And now we're going to do the same thing for all the other seams. Now I'm all finished. Let's check it out. So our seams are all sewn together and our fabric is taken in. So if you have a lot of fabric, you can definitely cut some off. If you don't have a ton of fabric here to cut off, what I want you to do is seam rip that original seam so that way you can get the fabric to lay flat, and we're going to iron it. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be seam ripping the original seam, and then we're going to iron open this extra fabric. And it's going to get it to lay really smooth, and you're really going to notice a difference. I'm not cutting it off because if I ever need to let it out again, I'm not going to have enough fabric there. So since I just took it in at most an inch at the waist on each seam, I'm just going to leave this extra in here. It's not enough to create bulk to ruin the fit. To iron these seams open, I'm going to put the hem on the inside of the jacket, so in between the lining and the self. If you don't have a ham, you could roll up a dish towel. This will also help you out. So this curved shape here though is going to help us iron nice and smooth. We want to steam that seam open, and you can see how the size of the seam is changing. So you can really see where we took it in. Now that the seams are pressed open, you can really see where we took it in because the seam is creating a different shape. Now let's turn it right side out, take a look at it, talk about the lining. Our seams are looking so nice and smooth. This is what we're looking for. You can't even tell that we took in these seams. There's no bubbles. They blend perfectly into the original seam that was there. So our lining seams, we actually don't have to take them in because we didn't take the jacket in like 10 inches or something. But if you did take it in like so much, like 10 inches or something, you are going to want to take in your lining the same amount. But because we only took it in a few inches, we can actually just leave that extra in the lining. It's just going to hang there and drape there, and the lining's not super bulky, so it'll be just fine. There's another reason we left the lining free. We didn't sew it to the self because we don't need to necessarily take in that lining. Now the last thing we need to do is sew back up that hem at the bottom. So we're just going to hand stitch that up. But if you flipped it through the sleeve, just go ahead and add that pin tuck back to the sleeve. So let's check this out on the dress form so we can really see how it's fitting. So we can see that the seam at center back is nice and smooth, and so are our seams on the side. So we have some more shape in the body here. So some more contouring to the body. And we did that by just taking in these seams here. And here's how it looks from the front. So you can really see how this blazer now has more shape. It's more tailored to the body. And it wasn't even that hard, was it? We just took in 3 seams. Thanks so much for watching Sew Anastasia today. If you would like to see any more videos on tailoring or blazers, let me know what you'd like to see down below in the comments so I can add it to my shooting list. And if you enjoyed the video today, make sure you give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel a lot. And if you want to learn more about sewing, well, make sure you check out my online sewing classes and my in-person sewing classes here in Chicago. Plus, we have an online sewing club, and you get a new pattern every single month with all kinds of video and pattern lessons. So make sure you check those things out. Links are down below. And if you want to know what's going on in the studio, well, make sure you check out my Instagram stories. I'm always posting what's going on in the studio and what Iris is up to as well. Thank you so much for watching today. Bye!